Okonkwo is reprimanded for his arrogant behavior with one of his tribesmen. Um, Without looking at the man, Okonkwo had said, "This meeting is for men." It means that he is calling him a woman or an Agabala. So, since the culture is masculine, largely patriarchal, uh, the people who do not have titles in their credit are considered Agabala, or Agbala is the name for woman. So he called that man a woman. But for that, saying, he was strongly taken down by the elders of the tribe. The man who had contradicted him had no titles. That was why he had called him a woman. Okonkwo knew how to kill a man's spirit. But this thing was not, even if somebody does not have titles with him, he is not the element of mockery in front of others. Rather, he should be respected also because this he is a clansman. So he has a status in the society. If he does not have a title, so society does not snatch the right of living with him from him, right? So Kanku had to say sorry to that gentleman. Kanku said he was sorry for what he said, and the meeting continued. So meeting demanded that he should say sorry to the man whom he had called a woman. One more aspect that we see in this culture is the uh, individual's worth or individual struggle. So struggle is also appreciated by gods. So one who struggles is helped by gods. So gods help those who help themselves. When a man says yes, is she is a god, says yes also. It means that if a man is lazy, his gods would not help him. So it depends upon the struggle of a man for uh, development. So gods also help those people who do hard work. Well, we have slight mention of Akhenaten, who has become a part of their family because he's been living with them for 3 years. So it's quite long a time for a boy to get settled in a tribe and, for that matter, in a family. So Karnifona is very much part of their family, and now Nvoye is also inspired by some of his traits, and he uh, helps Okonkwo in setting the yams or seeds of the yams, and he, in a way, appreciates Okonkwo, though in his heart, not openly. So this aspect has been also mentioned in this chapter. The other very interesting example or instance that we find here of cultural representation is Week of Peace. So festivals are very much part of a culture, as I have already told you. So here, HB has mentioned Week of Peace uh, that the Africans or Igbo people celebrate before harvesting their crops. So, week of peace is very important because they are not supposed to break that peace, break peace during that week. But unfortunately, Okonkwo broke the peace and was punished, as was the custom by Zini, the priest of the earth gods. So nobody is above law, no matter how brave you are, no matter how strong you are, no matter how rich you are not above the law. Konko, one of the influential persons in Ibu tribe, has also to face consequences for his committing a crime, and that crime was breaking the peace during Week of Peace that they celebrate for before cultivation. So how did he do that? He beat one of his wives relentlessly because she went away without telling him, and she lied to Okonkwo, which Okonkwo did not like. So in this way, she was punished mercilessly or relentlessly by um, Okonkwo during Week of Peace, and people came to him in order to uh, tell him that he is doing something wrong. So for that matter, he was punished by the goddess. So what was the punishment? He had to bring a hen or a goat to the place, to the altar. So he had to compensate for the act that he did. Otherwise, nobody is allowed to harm anyone, even if somebody's neighbor. Nobody is allowed to harm anyone in order to maintain peace in that week. So this is quite cultural because we don't see this instance somewhere else, but this here in Obi or in Africa. So through this novel, HAB is trying to represent his local culture. Um, Okonkwo brought up kola nut and placed it before. So this is the meeting of Okonkwo with the priest, right? It is a kind of trial before punishment. So it is not that if somebody has done a crime, he is not heard. But Zini, the representative of goddess, comes to Okonkwo in order to investigate into the matter. And he finds him guilty, and for that reason, he announces the punishment. You know as well as I do that our forefathers ordained that before we plant our crops, now this is uh, telling something about culture, ordained that before we plant any crops in the earth, we should observe a week in which a man does not say a harsh word to his neighbor. We live in peace with our fellows to honor our great goddess of the earth, without whose blessing our crops will not grow. You have committed a crime. So this is the verdict, or this is the conviction that was levied upon Konko, and in order to recompense that, he has to go to the altar in order to uh, fulfill the demands of the priest. The evil you have done can ruin the whole clan. The earth goddess whom you have insulted may refuse to give us her increase, and we shall all perish. His tone now changed from anger to command. What he says, you will bring to shrine of tomorrow one she goat, one hen, a length of cloth, and 100 cowries. He rose and left the hut. And Konko, of course, followed the instructions next day because he follows the law of the land, which is quite respected there. So no work was done during the week of peace. No work was done during the work of people called on their neighbors and drank palm wine. So they would enjoy palm wine and drink with their neighbors, and they would do no work. So they were not bored of not doing work, but they would celebrate this uh, festival. This festival is one of the cultural manifestations through this writing that we have seen, and we would see some more instances in upcoming novels, in upcoming chapters, that how the cultural is strongly knit with such festivals. And in this week of peace, what do? They simply go to their farms to clear them and remove them from bushes. The cut bush was left to dry, and fire was then set up. As the smoke rose into the sky, kites appeared from different directions and hovered over the burning field in silent valediction. So this week is very important for them in order to get a fresh start. And Kongpo is also preparing his seed games with the help of Kanifona and his son Navoji. Navoji, although he is a bit lazy, but he is being trained by Kanifona, and this is appreciated by Kongpo because he wants Navoji, unlike his father, but like a Kanifona who is hardworking and struggling. So this chapter is largely about the week of peace that we have just discussed. In chapter 5, we see another festival, and this is the Feast of the New Yam. So you see that in every culture we celebrate the New Year. For example, Chinese New Year is different from the Western New Year, or the Islamic New Year is different from African New Year. Um, so they have their own particular dates for them. So they celebrate the feast of the New Year. It's a kind of New Year for them, and they arrange a festival because whole Mafia is in festival mood. So, what is this feast of New Year? It is held every year before the harvest begins to honor the earth goddess. Week of Peace is celebrated before sowing, and Feast of the New Year is held after that sowing and before harvest begins. Um, it is to honor the earth goddess and the ancestral spirits of the clan. New yams could not be eaten until some had first been offered to these powers. Men and women, young and old, look forward to the New Yam festival because it began the season of the plenty, the New Year. So it's a kind of New Year that they celebrate before harvesting, and they also sacrifice some of the uh, feeds in order to please the goddesses and gods. So it is part of their culture. So we have seen so far we have seen two cultures, two festivals in their cultures, which are very important with respect to their economical growth, economic growth. Along with that, along with that, we see another aspect of their culture that they also like sports. So we have an instance of a wrestling match or a wrestling contest. And this contest is not only liked by men, but also by women like Akwefi, who is very maniac about this match because it reminds her of her own marriage, right? So she liked Okonkwo playing that match when he was young. So she fell in love with him at that time. Although she could not marry him, because Okonkwo did not have enough money at that time to give the bride money to Ekwefi's parents. But later she eloped with them and she left the first husband for Okonkwo because she was all love for Okonkwo. So wrestling match, of course, uh, human beings do matches, right? Um, Unlike the canonical narratives, where we see that these black Africans or Afro Americans, they are the savages, or they are wild. They are not run by any laws, or they are not human beings. They are creatures. But here, when we see that they do have their festivals, they do have the language, they do have matches, they play matches. What is match? Match is basically is the name of sportsman spirit. This sportsman spirit teaches people to be patient when they lose, and when they win, they celebrate. So this sportsman spirit is quite cultural and civilizational, and it means that they are quite civilized people, and they have the stamina to uh, bear their loss or their defeat. So this chapter is largely about the sports and festival, the New Year festival that they celebrate at the before the harvest of the crops. Well, then chapter 6 is about the craze of that sport, and it's about the extension of that wrestling match that we have discussed in previous chapter. It indicates one cultural form of excursion. Uh, Although the Igbo's culture is masculine, the people like the sports like wrestling. Even women like Ekwafi have praise for it, and she, along with her daughter, wants to participate or see or watch that match. Uh, and she's very excited to see that. And since it has not begun, it will start in the evening somewhere. So they are planning to watch that match. So we have a little reference of Chilu here, one of the goddesses, one of the interpreter of the oracles. And since Ekpefi's daughter Azenema is ill, so um, she is going to be taken to the medicine man in order to be cured. So we'll see in upcoming chapters that how she gets ill and how she is treated by her parents. Well, this match is quite the short chapter is about that wrestling match that we have discussed already. Uh, in chapter 7, we have two stories. Uh, First part tells us about the attack of locusts. Locusts are a very deadly creature in the West. It is very deadly creature for the crops. But in Africa, contrary to the West, we see that people enjoy the arrival of locusts. It is because this is one of their foods. They catch locusts in order to eat them. Unlike West, because West cannot afford their crops to be destroyed. Unlike West, here in Igbo or in Africa, people catch them and try to make them as their food. So this attack of locusts is has been mentioned here in this chapter. Um, as I've talked, that Okonkwo inwardly appreciated Karnifona because he was training Navoje to grow into a tough young man. Because Okonkwo did not like the characteristics of his father into his son. So that was the reason that he appreciated Karnifona, making Navoje as a strong and tough man, um, because Okonkwo was very hateful towards the characteristics of his father because he was a lazy person, and Okonkwo does not want his Nvojo to be a lazy person as well. So Okonkwo encouraged the boys to sit with him in his obi, and Karnifona was allowed to sit with him in his hut, and he told them stories of land masculine stories of violence and bloodshed. Navoye knew that it was right to be masculine and to be violent, but somehow he still preferred the stories that his mother used to tell, and which she, no doubt, still told to her younger children stories of the tortoise and his willy ways and the birds. So see that he was more tilted towards the stories told by the fantasy stories told by his mother, but the father, Okonkwo, wanted him to accompany Karnifona, and he appreciated Karnifona for telling him the masculine stories in which the bloodshed and violence has been mentioned. So, to make him a tough man, he was looking for a Karnifona as a guide or a teacher for Navoje. But Navoje was sensitive, unlike his father. He did not have the qualities of his father, so that's why he was the point of aggression for Okonkwo. So locusts reached finally to their tribe, and the West farmers are afraid of locusts, as I've told that they destroy their crops. But in Africa, like in Pakistan in last year, we see that there was an attack of locusts, and people would catch them in Sindh, in the remote part of Sindh, and they would make this teddy dil biryani, right? So such dish is also made by the Amofian people. Many people went out with baskets trying to catch them, but the elders counseled patience till nightfall, and they were right. The locusts settled in the bushes for the night, and their wings became wet with dew. Then all Amphia turned out in spite of the cold Harmattan, and everyone filled his bags and pots with locusts. The next morning, they were roasted in clay pots and then spread in the sun until they became dry and brittle. And for many days, this rare food was eaten with solid palm oil. So this is one of the interesting foods for them. Locust is one of the interesting foods for them, and they would enjoy that food for many weeks. The second story is about Epiphanes. Although Okonkwo was warned by one of the wisest men in the tribe, Ogbufi Ozidio, uh, by saying that, by telling Okonkwo that that boy calls you father, do not bear a hand in his death. Okonkwo was surprised and was about to say something when the old man continued. Yes, Amorphia has decided to kill him. The oracle of the hills and the caves has pronounced it. They will kill him outside Amorphia as is the custom and kill him there. But I want you to have nothing to do with it. He calls you his father. So this is the warning that was given to Okonkwo by Ozidio. But he does not care this warning, and he goes with the people or with the troop who is going to kill Kanifona. So this probably is quite heart-wrenching a story because Kanifona calls Konku a father as father, and he thinks that he is very sincere to him. While on his way, he was singing uh, in order to recall his mother, and because he thought that he was going to meet his mother very soon, but the plane was different, and he did not know about the plane. And what was the plan? One of the men behind him cleared his throat. Kanifona looked back, and the man growled at him to go and on and not stand looking back. The way he said it sent cold fear down Kanifona's back. His hands trembled weakly on the black spot he carried. Why had Okonkwo withdrawn to the rear? Kanifona felt his legs melting under him, and he was afraid to look back. As the man who had cleared his throat drew up and raised his machete, Okonkwo looked away. He heard the blow, the pot fell and broke in the sand. He heard Kanifona cry, "My father, they have killed me." As he ran towards him, dazed with fear, Okonkwo drew his machete and cut him down. He was afraid of being fought weak. You see that how heartrending the story is. Akanifona still finds a shelter in Okonkwo's strong arms, but that shelter becomes his enemy. No sentiments, no emotions in protagonist. Why? Because he thought that he would be considered, he would be guilty, and his conscience would, you know, uh, beat him all the time, saying him as a weak person. So he did not want to be a weak person, a very lowly person, but a strong man who does not care for anyone except the law of land. And the law of the land says that this boy must be killed, no matter who this boy is. But this is not the law of religion in Africa, because earth goddess do have some sentiments, right? So this was a cruel, unjustified act, although it is justified by Okonkwo all the time that he has done that act to please the law of the land, or to follow the law of the land, and to follow the instructions of the elders of the tribe. But that leaves a strong sense of guilt in Okonkwo's conscience, and afterwards he was unable to eat something because he kept on thinking about the action that he did, or the killing that he did of Akhenaten. After the death of Akhenaten, what happens? Um, Okonkwo is disturbed. He was unable to eat something, or he was unable to drink something, because he thought that something bad had happened, and he should not have accompanied the group who was given this task of killing. But along with that, the Akwafi and Azenma. Azenma is the daughter of Akwafi and Okonkwo. Uh, both try to get him round and lighten up, but that did not work much. And sometimes um, Okonkwo thought that Zenma should have been uh, his boy instead of his daughter. So here you can see, um, when she tried to make him eat, Okonkwo ate the food absent-mindedly. And he said she should have been a boy. He thought as he looked at his 10-year-old daughter. He passed her a piece of fish. Go and bring me some cold water, Zenma brought it. So, since Navoye was not that manly or that violent or that tough, unlike Navoye, this Zenma was having some qualities or some spark which Okonkwo could read. So he thought that Zenma should have been a boy, or he longed for another boy because he had killed one. Akanyafona was a boy whom he could trust, but now since he has killed him, he's missing one boy. So he thought that she should have been a boy instead of Navoye. But this guilt or of conscience, um, Okonkwo has a dialogue with himself, or his monologue, in which he says, "When did you become a shivering old woman?" Okonkwo asked himself. "You who are known in all the 9 villages for your valor in war, how can a man who has killed 5 men in battle fall to pieces because he has added a boy to their number? Okonkwo, you have become a woman indeed." So he's trying to buck himself up. He's bucking himself up. He's trying to encourage that he has not done something wrong. He's justifying that killing by relating it with the killing of war, because since that boy was a compensation for a murder, and his fate was to be decided by his tribe. So uh, anything that was to be done by the tribe was the duty of Kongpo. So he did not do anything wrong according to his thinking. But still, the people like Ozidio, Ogbufi, and Obereka was one of his friends who would not appreciate his killing of that boy, and he would have given an alternative for his action, although he was also given the same punishment. Somehow, Okonkwo finds some um, relief in Obereka's house, because Obereka is going to celebrate the marriage of his daughter, and when Okonkwo visits him, um, he tells the story, and Obereka also tells that um, he should not have accompanied that boy in killing. So he says, "I cannot understand why you refused to come with us to kill that boy." He asked Obreka, "Because I did not want to. I had something better to do." So you sound as if you question the authority and the decision of the oracle who said he should die. So you see, Obereka has this decision power not to go on some ventures, but Okonkwo blindly follows the rules of the oracles or the decisions of the oracle. Um, and he also tells, Varika also tells that he is not afraid of killing, but somehow this killing is not justified according to Varika. You know very well, Okonkwo, that I am not afraid of blood, and if anyone tells you that I am, he is telling a lie. And let me tell you one thing, my friend, if I were you, I would have stayed at home. What you have done will not please the earth. It is the kind of action for which the goddess wipes out whole families. So this action is not appreciable by goddesses, and whole family is wiped out. So this is the consequences of such action. Although this is the law of land, but it is not appreciated by the religious authorities. So, and this is a kind of foreshadowing that we see that the whole family will be wiped out from the surface of Mofia, and the consequences that he has to face when he would return, and one action that he would do in Mofia, and that action would lead him towards his fall. So this is one of the foregrounding or foreshadowing that we see here. So killing is not appreciated. Although Obereka is his friend, still he does not appreciate that killing. But right. So he has a suitor around. So he asks the Concord to sit with them and enjoy. Meanwhile, we come across another love story of two lovebirds. So it is quite cultural that they have folk tales in their culture, right? So we have a couple who are in love, and their love is quite famous all over Mofia, not on Mofia, but also on in 9 villages. That is to say, said Ofido, Ozimina was, as you know, too old to attend the duelers during his illness. His younger wife did that. When he died this morning, one of these women went to Zimena's hut and told her. She rose from her mat, took her stick, and walked over to the Obi. She knelt on her knees and hands at the threshold and called her husband, who was laid on a mat. Ogbufi she called 3 times and went back to her hut. When the youngest wife went to call her again to be present at the washing of the body, she found her lying on the mat dead. So she could not bear the loss of her husband. So she died herself. Now it is one of their customs that if husband and wife die together, the first burial is given to the wife. So mourning is halted for a moment, and this is what happens there. That they did not announce the death of Redulo because of the death of Ozimina. So that is very strange indeed, said Ngonko. They will put off the Nedula's funeral until his wife has been buried. That is why the drum has not been beaten to tell a Mofia. It was always said that Nedulo and Ozimina had one mind, said Obreka. I remember when I was a young boy, there was a strong song about them. He could not do anything without telling her. So this is the level of confidence and love between these two. So this shows that the Morphian culture is not about war and violence all the time. It is about law, it is about love, it is about festivals, and it is very colorful uh, in its composition. So, unlike canonical representation in the Western novels, we see that uh, we are shown a colorful culture of Africa through Things Fall Apart. So, this is a counter narrative to those Western canonical narratives on Africa. And these are instances. We see that these are instances. Although the story development is very slow, in first 13 chapters we hardly have a story development, but we see that we have the instances of cultural representation. We have festivals, we have funerals, we have marriages. In upcoming chapters, we will have a marriage of Oberika's daughter with a young man, and that young man is going to be the husband of Oberika's daughter, and we would see that how they settle their marriages, what are their customs, and how they celebrate such events. So when a suitor comes, how the girl presents them kola the way we have in our culture that when a suitor comes to someone's house, so we present tea and other things. So similarly, there, as he was speaking, the boy returned, followed by a Quickie, his half sister, carrying a wooden dish with three cola, nuts, and alligator pepper. She gave the dish to her father's eldest brother and then shook hands very shyly with her suitor and his relatives. She was about 16 and just ripe for marriage. Her suitor and his relatives surveyed her young body with expert eyes as if to assure themselves that she was beautiful and ripe. So, this is their on the custom to get acquainted with the suitor. When they then finally they discuss the matters, the marriage. The men in the OB had already begun to drink the palm wine which a Quickie suitor had brought. It was very good wine and powerful, for in spite of the palm fruit hung across the mouth of the pot to restrain the lively liquor white foam. So they share the palm wine. And this is a social structure that they sit together and they enjoy drinks together and they pray for their lives. The wine is the work of good taper, said Concord. Taper is the person who taps the um, trees in order to make that wine. The young suitor, whose name was Abi, smiled broadly and said to his father, "Do you hear that?" He then said to his others, "He will never admit that I am a good taper." The way we joke our youngers, that how they can do such a big word. Well, then they settle the marriage, and the bride money is settled indirectly, not directly. They don't demand money directly. Avareka then presented to him a small bundle of short broomsticks. So those broomsticks are given to them so to give them a message that such amount of money is required. Okigbo counted them. They are 30, he asked. Kopra nodded in agreement. We are at last getting somewhere, Okigbu said. And then turning to his brother and his son, he said, "Let us go and out and whisper together." The three rose and went outside. When they returned, Okigbu handed the bundle of sticks back to Obereka. He counted them again. Instead of 30, there were only 15. He passed them over to his eldest brother, Mashi, who also counted them and said, "We had nothing thought to go below 30, but as the dog said, if I fall down for you and you fall down for me, it is play. Marriage should be a play and not fight. We are falling down again." He then nodded 10 sticks to the 15 and gave the bundle to Grigbu. So this is how they settled the bride money. That was finally settled to 20 bags of coins. So this is how means it means that they have this sense of settling, and they are not vulgar and open, and they are not selfish in demanding that money. All the customs are upside down. This is what he is criticizing the culture of other tribes. He says that all the customs are upside down. They do not decide right price as we do with sticks. They haggle and bargain as if they were buying a goat or cow in the market. So it means that they don't consider the women as cows and goats in the market. Rather, they consider them human beings and they take them in. So this one-liner, is quite important. What is good in one place is bad in another place. It means that we should not have a reference point to judge someone. For example, sometimes it happens that West thinks that it is the reference point, and all other cultures should analyze or be judged uh, while keeping the Western culture in mind. So HEB wants to maintain that these cultural values are relative, and what is good in one place may be bad in another place. So this difference should be respected. This difference should be respected. so which is not respected by and large in the Western canonical discourses. And one more, it seems, criticism, because the white skin is in quotation marks. So you see that it has been associated with leprosy. So this is a racial counter narrative that he gives, that white skin is not a superior thing, but it's a leprosy or a disease. Well, chapter now 9 is largely about the illness of Zenma. Azenma is dying. Azenma is the daughter of a Kongpo, and this chapter is about the illness of that daughter. She got ill last year also before, but recovered due to her Iji Uva. Iji Uva is a cultural thing that they have embedded here, which was dug out by a medicine man. However, after a year, she is again uh, at her deathbed. So both the parents are trying to treat her with traditional uh, herbs. So this chapter is largely about the disease of Azenema and the concerns of Okonkwo and Ekwafi, who are trying to make uh, medicine for her. Chapter 10, in chapter 10 we see that largely it is cultural, because it tells one more festivals, and this festival the spiritual authorities are personified and spirits of ancestors are impersonated. So they gather at one place, they assemble at one place, and the spirits are impersonated, and those spirits are considered as symbols of justice and equality. They try to settle the matters, and there is a story of a man who is complaining about the behavior of his in-laws, but in fact it is the other way around, and the uh, person who is complaining is held responsible for not taking care of his wife. So they set the terms and conditions. So this is how they do in their. This is quite cultural, that these impersonated figures try to maintain justice in society. So this is a social structure also. So this Igwigwo is a religious cultural festival that has been embedded in this chapter 10, and whose sole function is to maintain peace and harmony in the society. In chapter 11, we find some incorporation of some folk tales, followed by Akbala's episode of taking a Zenma with her on her back and Akwafi chasing her. So the first, Zenema and Akwafi share some folk tales. So these folk tales are very much cultural, because African culture is famous for its folk tales, because these folk tales are full of messages and wise saying. So HEB tries to embed those folk tales in these chapters. So Zenema is ill, and it has become the duty of Oracle and Agbala. Agbala is the representative of that oracle, who takes her away towards the shrine on her back. But Egwafi is very strong, and she uses her agency and follows uh, that representative or Agbala in order to see where she had taken cinema. And in this way, Akonko also follows, seeing the courage of Egwafi. He also follows her, and when they reach the place, they are together. So this is the episode of Zenema and Akbala. Chapter 12 is about the death of Ogbufi. Before that, we see the marriage ceremony of Obareka's daughter, which was discussed in the uh, chapter number 10. So, Obareka's compound is full of people, cocoa yams, and other drinks for the people who have visited him. And it tells us about the strong cultural institution of marriage and how they celebrate their marriages. So this is one of the representations, cultural representations, or the instance of cultural representation available to us that shows their institution of marriage. Right. Chapter 13 is about, and very important because this chapter is the climax of the novel, because the extreme action will take place in this chapter at the death of Azio Ogbufi. So there was a gong, beating of drums, because somebody had died. And who was that somebody? That somebody was Uzidio Ogbufi, the wisest, the oldest of the tribe. So Aziodo was a great man, and so all the clan was at his funeral. The ancient drums of death beat, guns and cannon were fired, and men dashed about in frenzy, cutting down every tree or animal they saw, jumping over walls and dancing on the roof. It was a warrior's funeral, and from morning till night, warriors came and went in their age group. So he was a great warrior. He had three titles to his name, to his credit, and his funeral was to be honored. So, in order to honor the funeral, people brought their guns with them in order to shoot a fire in the air, and they were in frenzy. So, everywhere they were mourning. People were mourning his funeral. So, because he was the legend, a legendary figure in the tribe. So people have certain things because he had many things to describe. So people would say, Azidio, if you had been poor in your last life, I would have asked you to be rich when you come again. It tells about the belief or set of belief about the life cycle of the African people. So Azidio was rich. If he were poor, they would have asked for his richness in the next life. But you were rich. If you had been a coward, I would have asked you to bring courage. Means this thing cannot be done because he was not a coward. But you were a fearless warrior. If you had died young, I would have asked you to get life. But you died at quite late age. But you lived long. So I shall ask you to come again the way you came before. Means you should come. Your existence was fruitful for this society, so you should come the way you should have come before. If your death was the death of nature, go in peace. But if a man caused it, do not allow him a moment's rest. So this is how people mourn the funeral of Azidu Ogbufi. He was such a great warrior. But during that morning, a tragic thing happens that changes the entire structure of a mafia or a concourse family, to be specific. And then from the center of the delirious fury came a cry of agony and shouts of horror. It was as if a spell had been cast. All was silent. In the center of the crowd, a boy lay in a pool of blood. It was the dead man's 16-year-old son, who, with his brothers and half brothers, had been dancing the traditional farewell to their father. A Concourse gun had exploded, and a piece of iron had pierced the boy's heart. So, unfortunately, it was a Concourse gun that fired into the heart of Ogbufi's son, and he was killed on the spot. Since this was inadvertent or it was unintentional, such crimes in Igbo are considered female because the culture is largely masculine. So they associate this negative connotation with femaleness. So the only course open to Okonkwo was to flee from the clan. It was a crime against the earth goddess to kill a clansman, and a man who committed it must flee from the land. The crime was of two kinds, male and female. Okonkwo had committed the female because it had been inadvertent. It could return to the clan after 7 years. So this is the law of the land that must be followed. No matter you are rich, you are poor, you're strong, you're elder, you're young. You have to follow the law of the land, and that must be respected. And we have been told in canonical literature, we have been told that the African societies or the black societies are largely anarchical. They don't have a law. But right from the beginning till this point, we have been discussing many laws, no matter they are religious laws or they are social laws or they are made by people, they are respected and followed. And the people like a Kongpo, who are very strong, they are also helpless to follow those laws. It means that they have very social, they have very strong social structure. So this is a counter narrative to the existing um, canonical imperial narratives on Africa that we have discussed. That Africa is a-religious, a-cultural, a-social, a-historical. But we see that there are many instances in this novel that we find till this chapter 13 that Africa is historical, cultural, religious, lawful, civilized, and there are many other traits that can be associated with Africa. So, law of the land must be respected. And 7 years banishment is the punishment for this inadvertent killing. Now, this is the climax of the story. Now, we'll see that how it will be resolved in the upcoming pages. Now, people are enraged because the son of a warrior has been murdered, and it was dangerous for Okonkwo. But in this dangerous time, his greatest friend Oberika was among them, and Oberika helped Okonkwo at great length. How? By giving him some money, by giving him some seeds, and by investing his seeds into his own seeds, so that he continuously pays him off when he is living abroad in his mother's tribe. So, since he has committed a female crime, he be sent to mother's tribe. So, he was sent to his mother's tribe, and this is again emasculation. Emasculation means uh, going to inferior place. So this emasculation is very fatal, or it's very disturbing or pinching for Kongpo, because he does not like weak things. But he has to choose this course because this is the law of the land. And Obrika uh, at night helps him to evacuate or escape the place because people were in rage and they could, in fury, they could attack or assault a Concourse heart. And this is what they did next morning, and the people uh, attacked his obi, and they totally burned his obi in anger. Such was the thing that happened. This is the part one of the novel that I have just discussed with you, and we see that the story development is very slow in first these 13 chapters, but cultural representation is quite replete. Story is merely that there is a protagonist who has a family, and his family is living peacefully due to his struggle, and finally. Um, since he is brave, he is sent to another tribe as an emissary to bring a virgin and a boy. He kills that boy, and he has a sense of guilt of killing him, but he tried to compensate himself, saying that it is the law of the land that he followed. And at the uh, simultaneously, there was the news of the death of Ozidio Ogbufi, and on that death, procession, inadvertently, this Okonkwo killed the son of Ozudu Ogbufi, which triggered a fire among the clansmen, and before they set the obi or the hut of Okonkwo into on fire, Okonkwo escaped with the help of Oberoi Khan. So this was the plot development so far that we have, but there is a cultural representation. We have seen so many funerals. We have been told about a marriage. We have been told about festivals. We have been told about the belief system regarding illness. We have been told about religion. So basically, this is a counter narrative that has been perpetuated by HB in this novel Things Fall Apart. In the upcoming parts, part two and part three, we would see that the life of Okonkwo in his mother's tribe is quite passive, and in part three, when he returns, he sees that the fate of Omofia has been handed over to the intruders or the colonizers. So this is all about part one that we have discussed. And if you have any questions, uh, please may ask. You may ask the questions.